Thank you. I'm Phil Dubois, and welcome to the spring budget convocation. Good to see you all out here this morning after that weekend. I thought maybe several of us would just stay home and enjoy the good weather. We have several things we want to try to do this morning. The main purpose is to tell you about our budget situation and for next year, what we think we know about it, and some on what we don't know yet. But because the budget session may very well wrap up after some faculty have headed off for the summer, we thought this would be a good time for the convocation. And I want to give you some idea what we think the consequences of those budget issues could be. We also want to tell you about some non-budget legislative items that are currently before the General Assembly that will affect UNC employees and the policies and procedures that we use. The most important of which we'll talk about in a few minutes is the proposal to consolidate the SPA and the EPA personnel systems under the Board of Governors and take the university out from under the state personnel system. And we also want you to be prepared for some difficult news, some related to expenses that all of us as employees will have to bear next year, and some related to possible reductions in force on the campus depending on the outcomes of the budget negotiations in the General Assembly and with the governor. In all of this, we are committed, as we have been in the past, to complete transparency with you, full disclosure. You know what we know. We think that should be. But as you'll hear from several of our speakers, there are some things we just don't know at this point. And can't know. Let me do a little bit of definitional work. If you've not been to a budget convocation before or not heard a presentation in the faculty or staff councils, we're talking today mostly about our budget for fiscal year 12. Fiscal year 12 is the budget year that will begin July 1, 2011, this year, and go through June 30th of next year, fiscal 12. We are talking also mostly about permanent reductions in that fiscal year 12 budget. And what that means is that money that is budgeted in the budget will go away. It will be given back to the state and not available for expenditure, and it will not recur. We will also only be talking about state appropriations. You've heard us talk in the past about the color of money. State appropriations are one color of money that we have. That's the color that matters in the budget discussion. We are not talking about other forms of revenue that we have on campus, like tuition and fees, or federal grant money, or income for our bookstore, or residence halls, or our food services, or anything else. We're only talking about state appropriations. We also may talk briefly or in passing about reversions. Reversions are not permanent reductions, but they are reductions in your current year budget. In other words, the state says to us, you can't spend these dollars. They will come back into your budget next year. And sometimes reversions are intended on a campus because we want to use the money in another way. But this particular kind of reversion, this year, for example, throughout the year we've received 3.5% reversions, and in our case that means about $7 million we couldn't spend in our budget. And finally, we will talk a little bit sometimes about one-time money. One-time money comes about from permanent money in your budget that you choose not to spend in a particular year, and I'll give you a good example. If we get money to hire a new faculty member in a department, and during the course of that year, the faculty member's recruitment is going on, but we're not paying salary or benefits to that faculty member while they're being recruited, we can spend that money on other things, and we have and do. And often those are non-personnel things like road repairs or equipment acquisitions or fixing situations on the campus relating to safety or disability. So one-time money is an important source of expenditure on our campus, and it's become particularly important over the last several years here because, as you know, or we'll certainly find out, we've been holding money back and not filling positions in anticipation of the fiscal year 12 budget crisis, which has been predicted for some time. Let me go ahead and tell you what you're going to hear this morning and from whom. We're going to have 5 brief presentations, as brief as we can make them, to give you a good picture and then have enough time for a Q&A afterwards. I'm going to give you an overall sense of the budget situation in the state and the amount of reductions that we've been planning for. Betty Doster, who came on this year as Special Assistant to the Chancellor for Constituent Relations and who manages our relationships in Raleigh at the state capitol, among other things, will give you the political picture and a better understanding of the process that will be forthcoming to make final budget decisions. Because it's our largest division, we've asked the Provost, Joan Lorden, in Academic Affairs, to talk specifically about the academic impacts of the budget reductions. Beth Harden, our Vice Chancellor for Budget Affairs, will talk with you probably about the most difficult topics, some increased new costs and the reduction in force process. And then Gary Stinnett, our Associate Vice Chancellor for Human Resources, will talk about some of the non-budget items that are currently in front of the General Assembly, particularly those related to the personnel system. The current state appropriation in the state budget is about $19.5 billion. Our share of that is $207.6 million. It is still a matter of some discussion among political officials, elected officials, about how big the state deficit is. It ranges between the governor's budget, which was built upon an assumption of a shortfall of $2.1 billion, which would require a budget reductions on average of 10.8%, and the number currently circulating in the General Assembly, which is $2.5 billion shortfall, which would translate into an average cut of 12.8% across all state agencies. We don't yet know what the final deficit number will be, and I think one of the reasons you're seeing a little bit of a slowdown in the legislative process, as Betty will describe it to you, is we're waiting for the April revenue numbers to come in, which typically give us some idea of what the next fiscal year will hold. So that could move that 2.1 to 2.5 up or down accordingly, and that could affect the negotiations between the two chambers, between the two parties, and with the governor. Now, we've been looking at possible cuts throughout this year of 5%, 10%, and as of December, 15%. And the main reason that that number has gone up was that there were continued uncertainties about the revenues available in the state, and also an election occurred in November, you may remember it, and it simply changed the game. It changed the way we spoke about the possible reductions, because obviously the two parties have very different approaches about how they want to approach cutting in state government and generating revenues for state government. So 31.1 million is the number that we've been most recently using as our planning number. We get a little bit of relief from that 15% reduction of 31.1 million because we will have incoming tuition revenues, and currently the Board of Governors has authorized UNC Charlotte to impose a tuition increase for next year of 6.5%. That generates about $6 million, but the Board of Governors also says that we have to dedicate 25% of that to student financial aid. So the net cut to us, the net available tuition revenues, dropped to $4.4 million, leaving $26.7 million to be found in our budget. That's a lot. We've started to use figures around Raleigh that show legislators that that represents the combined budgets of 3 of our colleges. So it's a big number. We've managed that planning number by withholding enrollment increase monies over the last 3 years and also by limiting our hires to those that we considered most critical. And then we've had to pass some of the reductions on to our divisions, whether it be academic affairs, student affairs, business affairs, and the like. As you'll see from Dr. Lorden's comments, if you don't remember this, 80% of our budget is in academic affairs. So the ability of the divisions to contribute, the other divisions to contribute, is somewhat limited. We have been managing basically this budget crisis by trying to hold open as many positions as we can. Our commitment has been to jobs, trying to hold on to filled positions where you and I work. We have some positions that have come in with enrollment increase. These are approximations because we receive dollars, not positions, but this is our best estimate of about how many faculty and staff we've held back. You'll see there 97 faculty, 37 staff. As positions have become vacant by retirements or other departures from the university, we've held some of those positions open as well. And that's, if you add the two faculty numbers together, you see we have 148 faculty positions and about 105 staff positions that are vacant. And that's a very, very large number. That means all of us are taking on the workload of those people as the new students have arrived. We were able to move some people off of state appropriations onto other sources of money. Most often this has occurred in business affairs, but mostly in student affairs, where we had certain units that were receiving income from student fees, and we can move, because we had students, increased enrollment, and additional money, we feel we can absorb those folks onto student fee money. We do still think that at 15% we could have reductions in force. That means the elimination of positions filled currently by university employees in the neighborhood of 25 to 35. We have an employment base, I think, roughly of 3,100 people. So the odds of being hit with this personally are not high, but still very serious for those who are RIFed. And then we have non-personnel reductions, spending in equipment lines, paper, fuel, all kinds of other stuff of about $9.5 million. I'm going to turn it over to Betty, and then we'll just ask you to hold your questions till we get through, and then we're going to all gather up here for the Q&A.
Thank you, Chancellor. As Chancellor said, I am new to the university. I've been here for 5 months, and I've been in the lobbying business for over 20 years, and I can tell you that this is the best client I've ever had, and it's an honor to represent you before the state legislature and with local elected officials. There is great affection for what we do on this campus every day and what our students are achieving. And our legislature, though they have to make some very difficult choices, they do have an understanding of the achievements that we have here. I also want to say that the Speaker of the House, Thom Tillis, was on campus the first day of the new year, and a lot of how he views the university system is a result of the confidence he has in Chancellor Dubois and the incredible achievements we have here. And so it's great to have that kind of understanding in our leadership. But that doesn't mean that they don't and won't have difficult decisions to make that will impact us. I want to let you know where we are in the budget process, because you will be reading almost daily about different things that are occurring in Raleigh. And so I want to go through where we are today, where it's heading, and what's next. The governor's budget was released in February. It represented about a 9–10% cut in the university system. It also included the extension of 3/4 of the 1% increase in the sales tax that was instituted 3 years ago and is to expire June 30th. Now, the legislative leadership have said they will not extend that sales tax or the corporate or the personal income tax, which all three of them are to expire June 30th. And so that leaves about $1.1 billion less revenue to deal with. Now, over the last several weeks, we've been dealing with the House committee's proposals. They are what I consider draconian as it works with the university system, as it pertains to the university system. It's 15.5% cut to the university system. It's greater if you factor in the cuts to financial aid, or if we weren't able to get our building reserves and other funding that we need. It is only an 8.8% cut to K through 12 and a 10% cut to the community colleges. Over the next couple of weeks and up to about June 1st, we believe that the legislature will finish their work and the budget will be delivered to the governor. We expect some gamesmanship to go on, but we do think for the first time in many years that we may have a budget or will have a budget by June 30th. So where are we focused as a team and as a university system going forward? And that is to get these cuts down to a 10% level. You can see from the Chancellor's comments, there is a major difference in the impact to the university, our campus, between 10% and 15%. And so our job is to try to get those cuts closer to 10%. It's also to fully fund the operating expenses for both the opening of the Center City building and for EPIC. And I will tell you that there is strong support for both of those programs and getting those open. There's a great tie to the energy sector with EPIC, and so there does seem to be a lot of support for getting those open. And both of those are funded in both the governor's budget and in the House committee proposal. We're also focused on getting enrollment growth. There was some money in the governor's budget and in the House budget. We're also focused on having latitude around raising tuition. Gary will talk with you at greater length about some of the efficiency packages, items in the efficiency package. We are also very focused on those because it does give us some management flexibility, and some of the processes are just arcane and need to be updated. So that's where we are in the budget process and the legislative process. I encourage you to contact me if you have questions about where we are and what you're reading in the paper and what you're seeing and whether you have how it impacts you and how it impacts our campus. So, as I said, it's an honor to represent you, and I'll turn it over to the Provost, Joan Lorden.
Good morning, everyone. As the Chancellor said, it's been a commitment on the part of the institution over the past couple of years as we've faced some very serious budget cuts and reversions to protect jobs. The other thing that we've tried very hard to protect is the academic core. But I think all of you realize that when you start getting to cuts in your permanent operating budget on the order of 10 to 15%, after a period in which you've sustained cuts and reversions, it's very difficult to continue to protect the academic core, which constitutes 80%, give or take a few percent, of the state budget. So this is, in fact, a very difficult time. We've already, as you've seen, basically given up something on the order of 148 faculty positions. At a reduction of 15%, the Division of Academic Affairs will have to give up another $4.1 million. As we've thought about how to do this, there is, frankly, no easy way. And there's nothing that won't hurt everything that we do as an institution. Perhaps the easiest place to start is with reductions in the money that we use to purchase equipment. Because we've had enrollment increase money that we haven't yet given back, it's been possible for us to use that as one-time money, and so we have in fact done pretty well here in terms of providing for scientific equipment and things like personal computers, laptops that pretty much everyone has to have in order to function in today's university. So right now, if you walk around the campus, what you'll see is that in terms of equipment, we're in pretty good shape. So reducing the purchases for equipment is perhaps on a pain scale at the lower end of the pain scale. Reductions in our operating funds, however, are more severe. Our departments and our colleges and other units have relatively little operating money. We rely very heavily on vacant positions, particularly vacant faculty positions, to cover our operating expenses. But there isn't a really simple way to squeeze another $4 million out of the academic affairs budget without tapping into those operating dollars. And finally, we have to look again at vacant faculty positions. So this hurts us in a number of ways. It hurts the operating dollars that departments and colleges use to cover all kinds of expenses. It hurts our ability to hire the part-time faculty that we rely on. We spend about $4.5 million a year on part-time faculty, so you can see that this cut is roughly equivalent to that. So the impact of cuts like this, you're already feeling, because those 148 positions that you haven't gotten are positions that would have allowed us to offer more sections of classes, would have allowed us to continue a commitment that this campus has had for many years to small sections of classes. What we see now is that in our lower division classes, our general education program, our classes are basically at 100% capacity. At the same time, our students need and are demanding more services. In the University Center for Academic Excellence, the requests for tutoring services this past year went up over 100%. We've been encouraging students to take advantage of the resources that we offer them, and they've done it. But we're having to meet those demands with no new people. The Office of Student Success, same thing there. Big increase in demand, no new people. Financial aid, advising across the campus, what we're seeing is increased demand, but no new people. So as we look at fiscal year 12, what we're seeing is that we're going to have to make do with limited resources. We're going to have to face the fact that in some cases we may see some aging assets, some large pieces of equipment that we can't replace. And in fact, that we will see increased class sizes and necessarily smaller numbers of sections because we simply won't have the faculty to offer those classes. I have to say that as I look around the campus, I'm amazed at the kinds of things that people are trying to do to make do with less. In every single department, there's been thought given to what courses are essential, where there are opportunities to economize, and we've made better use of technology. This past year we have invested in developing an advising system that will allow us to be more efficient in advising because we're simply not going to have the resources to put more advisors in offices. So in a variety of ways, I think the campus has really risen to the challenge, but the challenge isn't over yet. One of the biggest challenges we face is the fact that there is a high demand for what we offer here. We see that the freshman class this year was held to roughly the same size that it was in 2008. So we've slowed down the admission of students considerably. We were growing at a rate of 4 to 6% per year. And we just didn't think that that was sustainable. So this past year, we were able to hold our admissions down to a growth rate of 1.4%. We're going to continue to do that. We've made admissions offers to freshmen for the 2011 class, for the fall 2011 semester that, again, will keep us at roughly where we were in 2008. But the demand is up. 5 years ago, we did a study that said that the demand for places at this institution would continue to grow and could reach an enrollment of 35,000. We're clearly not on that trajectory anymore, but the demand for those places is still here. So we have denied admission already to about 700 students who in past years would have been eligible for admission, and we're working on controlling the transfer class. I have to warn you that this is an imprecise exercise. We offer admission, but we can't always predict the yield with 100% accuracy, although I have to say our admissions office does a remarkable job in keeping us very close to the targets that we set. So this is where we're going to be. We think the class, that the size of the institution in terms of student numbers will be about the same size next year as it is this year. And we're doing that so that we can, in fact, control the size of our classes and try to meet our commitments to the students that we admit. And I hope that although this news is pretty grim, that everyone will remember that what we do is really important to the state, and we need to keep our eyes on the future because eventually things will get better. In the interim, I'm going to turn the podium over to Vice Chancellor Beth Hardin to talk about other budgetary issues.
Good morning. I'm Beth Hardin. I'm your Chief Financial and Administrative Officer, and you'll see that I drew the short straw this morning. Some of you have been around long enough to know that you might argue I've drawn it for 3 years in a row, but that's what you do when you do the kind of work that I do. So I'm going to share with you what we expect in terms of reduction in force and also changes in benefits. I do want to put this into context a bit. UNC Charlotte developed a plan for dealing with what we anticipated to be 3 or 4 years of a recessionary cycle. We developed that plan in the fall of 2008 when it became apparent that we would have a dramatic decrease in state revenues during the course of fiscal year 2009, which, as you'll recall, begins in 2008. This 3-year plan, and we do anticipate at this point in time, it will be a 3-year plan instead of a 4-year plan, has served us very well. And the comments that you have heard this morning are all coming about because we've had a 3-year plan. Because we've had a 3-year plan, we've been able to limit the impact on employment on this campus, because we knew that fiscal year 12 would be by far the worst of the fiscal years. It is not because of any particular brilliance that we knew that. We simply knew that there was a lot of federal stimulus money in the state budget and in our budget, more than $12 million a year, and we knew that that stimulus money would no longer be available in fiscal year 12. So with that understanding, we have been able to develop and deploy a 3-year plan that has focused on keeping campus operating as well as possible, and also on being able to continue to employ as many people as possible. We are, again, heading into the 3rd year of the 3-year plan to deal with this recessionary cycle, and we expect that we will have to reduce between 25 and 35 positions across the university in light of these extraordinary reductions in budget. I don't need to repeat those. They've been mentioned to you by the Chancellor and also by the Provost. But because of the magnitude of these cuts, we do not expect to be able to make it through this fiscal year, or into this fiscal year actually, without a reduction in force. There are clearly defined processes for reductions in force for the employees who are subject to the State Personnel Act. Those are found in Personnel Information Memorandum number 19, which can be found on the Human Resources website under the Policies section. It lays out with a great deal of precision how reductions in force are taken into effect, the fact that those are done so within departmental boundaries, the process for determining which person is reduced when a position is eliminated, and it lays out the expectation for severance for SPA employees. There is an analogous process for EPA staff employees. It is simpler than the one for SPA employees, but it is analogous with the same kind of process to identify not only the position reduced, but the precise person, and also outlining opportunities for severance when appropriate. Recommendations that are made by any given unit for a reduction in force have to be reviewed extensively by the human resources function for that type of employee. In the case of SPA employees, those recommendations are reviewed by the Human Resources Department. And in the case of EPA employees, those positions are reviewed by the Academic Affairs Unit for EPA staff, and they also handle the budget as well. So those are not determinations that are finally made at the department level. At a department level, a recommendation will be made and will be forwarded to the appropriate HR unit for an extensive analysis of that recommendation. The reductions in force will be effective on July 1st, which is the beginning of the fiscal year. The reason for that is because we are reducing in force because we will not have the budget effective July 1st. We anticipate notifying employees who will be subject to reduction in force no later than June 1st, and it will probably be around June 1st. I do anticipate that there'll be questions about this topic, and of course in the Q&A time I'd be happy to address those, as would Gary Stinnett and Ray McCarl. I have to share with you additional disappointing and frustrating news, no doubt, to all of us. The first one, that is, it is the most reasonable assumption that we can make for fiscal year 12 is that the cost of health care will go up, health care insurance coverage in particular, but in addition to that, co-pays are also likely to go up. We cannot give you much precise information about this at this point in time because the ways in which this may change are still being debated at the state level. For those who don't follow the news as closely as perhaps I do, the state health plan has about a $500 million budget deficit. And so because of that enormous deficit, they must find ways to reduce cost or increase revenues. It is obviously simply not sustainable. And because of that, we do anticipate that there will either be an increase in premiums, also increase in co-pays, and some changes to exactly the coverage that's provided. We do not know the specifics. We will certainly update you as we know them. And then finally, again, we recognize the source of the frustration on this. The cost of parking will go up next year. We tried last year to reduce the cost, the increased cost of parking. Unfortunately, that really only shifted that increased cost until fiscal year 12. The reason for that is that we have a large parking program that is funded with debt financing. Those debts issuances have already been made, and that debt service has to be paid at this point in time. And we simply cannot avoid paying that debt service. There are, of course, operating costs as well, but we have deferred and used other funds and saved money in other ways to the degree possible there. We will be able to offer some low-cost options last year, as we did last year. And those have been very well received by campus. There are a couple of lots that are a little further distant from the center of campus that have been offered at a lower price. And again, we've had a lot of interest in those and subscription of those, so we'll be able to do that again. I will, of course, be available for questions following this session, and many of you know that we have recorded a number of budget messages that are available on the Budget News website. In addition to the 10 or so that are available now, we will be taping some this afternoon in response to the questions that you asked today. I'd like to introduce you to Gary Stinnett, our Associate Vice Chancellor for Human Resources. Gary is going to mention a number of efficiency initiatives at the state level and talk specifically about one designed to improve the efficiency of personnel administration. Gary.
Good morning. As mentioned, my primary responsibility will be to discuss this consolidation of personnel under the Board of Governors, and I expect most of you have at least heard of that, but I would want to also mention with the RIF situation looming large, Rayma Carl, my counterpart in academic affairs, and I have always taken that responsibility very seriously. We meet personally with every employee that finds himself in that situation. We had some success 2 years ago with redeploying or reassigning a number of employees from positions that were going away to positions that still needed to be filled and where they had the skills to fill that. So I am hopeful that we can have some success with that tool also again this year. But there will be more coming to you on that subject as we get deeper into it, and we're pretty close. The UNC General Administration recommended, I believe, 22 different types of efficiencies, things that the Board of Governors and the President and the Chancellors had agreed could help with the overall management of the university system. The consolidation of personnel management for UNC under the Board of Governors, and that is North Carolina General Statute 116, that authority, is probably the one that people are hearing the most about. But I want to briefly just run through a few others that you may not know are under consideration. Permanently extending the UNC phased retirement program for faculty. That program has existed for years, but it always requires legislative approval to renew it, and that's never guaranteed. But what they are asking, and I believe it is a good idea, is to permanently extend that so that we don't have to go through this uncertainty from year to year about knowing whether or not that's going to happen. Shorten the current break in service requirement for the reemployment of retirees to 1 month from 6 months. Let me just talk about that very briefly. You probably are aware that several years ago, probably going back 4 or 5 now, the North Carolina retirement system was able to get the General Assembly to direct legislatively that there would be a minimum 6-month break in service before anybody could come back to service. That was brought about because the Internal Revenue Service was dealing with a number of states, and because our retirement contributions are provided on a pre-tax basis, they said there had to be a definable break in service. Didn't have to be 6 months, but that's what got legislated. We've been pushing ever since then for that to be reduced. I can't sit here and tell you that I think it will ultimately be 1 month, but I think we do stand a chance to see that reduced perhaps to maybe 3 months, and that's certainly a step in the right direction. Vesting reciprocity between teasers and ORP. The short note there is that up until this time, if you changed retirement plans, for instance, if you went from SPA to EPA and decided you wanted to get into the optional retirement plan, you had to start your vesting all over, your 5-year vesting clock. So I think we'll see that change. This next one doesn't have anything to do with us, and frankly, I was surprised to find out that the UNC Healthcare doesn't have access to the optional retirement plan, so I believe that they'll get that. The other proposals that add up to this total of 32 are in a variety of different areas: purchasing proposals, capital authority, and I see Phil Jones out there, UNC surplus, property, how motor vehicles are purchased, and some even dealing with the management of real estate and investment flexibility. Senate Bill 575 is the bill that's been introduced, and you can go to the North Carolina website for the General Assembly, and you can do a lookup on that if you care to read detail on those proposals. But back to the consolidation. The why of it is that already, as we speak, the UNC Healthcare system, the 58 community colleges that operate in North Carolina, including Central Piedmont, the local school districts, and the 2 largest counties already have this authority. So we don't think that we're asking for anything that's revolutionary. And clearly, it would allow flexibility for us to do some things with respect to HR that we haven't been able to do in the past and that are increasingly important in the kind of market that we have to recruit and retain employees within. Approximately 50% of all the UNC employees are SPA, and that 50% only accounts for 13% of the state's total SPA workforce. One of the big issues is that currently we have 2 very different personnel systems in important ways, and it causes a lot of confusion. It causes confusion for employees, causes confusion for managers, and it's certainly not easy to administer. These multiple sets of rules and regulations are hard to follow, they're hard to track, they're hard to understand, and they do create some inefficient duplication of effort. And ultimately, for employees, with that confusion, it also creates inequities. Leave accrual rates are different, retirement systems are different, what people can qualify for are different, and it's not easy to keep track of all that. At UNC Charlotte, as the Chancellor said, we've got approximately 3,100 employees. About 49% are EPA faculty and EPA staff, and just about the same number are SPA permanent employees. Longevity pay is only applicable to employees that are subject to the Personnel Act, SPA. And right now we've got about 480 employees who have 10 or more years of service. That's when longevity pay kicks in for SPA employees. That represents about 1/3 of our SPA employees and about 15% of our total workforce. What doesn't change, and these are important. For good or bad, prices going up, we will have a health plan, and we will have a retirement system. We'll probably continue to have the teacher state retirement system as well as the optional retirement system. We're still bound by due process rights that accrue to us from federal and state laws and UNC policies. We're subject to the Fair Labor Standards Act. That's not going to change. Civil Rights Act, Age Discrimination Act, Americans with Disabilities, family medical leave, on and on. And there are portions of the State Personnel Act that today currently apply to EPA employees and will continue to apply to all of us regardless of what system we're in. Protection under EEO, affirmative action, veterans preference, whistleblower, on and on. Those things will still be in place. In addition, in whatever form this new consolidation might take, there will be policies that will have to be in place to assure due process with respect to disciplinary actions and dismissals. We will have to have, as we do today, grievance policies and processes so that employees can bring issues forward and have those appropriately considered. Career banding will continue. We do think, left to our devices within the UNC system, that we can certainly streamline that and make it more efficient. Evaluations will continue, and we think there are some improvements that are important to make in that area. Longevity pay, which is important to SPA employees, will probably be grandfathered. It's not clear exactly what will happen, but there is great sensitivity to that issue. And fringe benefits could change ultimately over time with the possibility of a new flex plan under the UNC system. We currently have that authority, but it hasn't been especially efficient to try to pursue that when we were under the North Carolina flex plan. And I'll have the chance here in a moment also to answer questions, but here is my contact information as well.
Okay, that's the landscape. Can we bring the house lights up and maybe, let me ask our speakers to come sit up here. We'll share a mic. And we'll ask you, if you have questions, raise your hand. I'll kind of referee from here, and we'll try to repeat your question so everyone can hear it. But if you'll shout it out good and loud, that would be helpful too. And anything upstairs? Can I? When the General Assembly leadership met with President Ross, they asked whether there would be certain things that could be done in the university system that would make the university more efficient and less costly over time. And the list of things that Gary mentioned were put together and submitted to the General Assembly. So it's a system-wide initiative that would affect all 17 campuses, and so would the other things that are on that list. Go ahead. And if you could attend this, Michael Green. Go ahead. The question was, of the 25 to 35 reductions in force, how many are likely to be faculty, and could it be tenured faculty? And I think I'm fair in saying that I think all those positions are staff. And the reason is that to reach tenured faculty, or even faculty with extended year contracts, you would have to, and given the notice requirements, which for tenured faculty are often a year, it would require a year's notice, and you'd almost have to declare financial exigency to be able to reach those individuals. And frankly, you know, a few weeks ago when the legislature was throwing numbers out around 20 and 30%, that would definitely have to reach tenured faculty and tenure track faculty. There just isn't enough money in our system. But right now at the 15% level, I don't think, Joan, you may have some
Right. The 25 to 30 really are staff positions, but the reduction in vacant faculty lines equates to something on the order of 30 additional faculty positions that we'll lose, which will bring our total loss of faculty positions to around 178. So a very, obviously a very significant number.
Maybe if I can't see your hand, just stand up. Go ahead. Yeah, Vivian. The question was, is the process that we had to put in place to fill so-called critical positions, faculty and staff, going to stay in place? Gary, do you want to handle that?
Well, right now it's in place because the governor put that soft freeze in around Christmas time. Until that goes away, I think we probably will be still under this requirement to document any decisions related to recruiting positions that we consider to be critical. Hopefully it'll go away at some point, but I can't tell you exactly when.
And we are filling positions, I think most people know. It's just, as we worked through our budget scenarios, we had a clear idea of how many dollars we were going to have to give back, but you simply can't freeze every position and make this place run. So we've had to have filling of vacant positions, and the governor even said at the time she issued the soft freeze that she considered instructional positions to really be critical.
I might add that when we started in this recessionary cycle, we expected a 3 or 4 year recessionary cycle. It would appear that it will be a 3-year cycle, largely a 3-year cycle, though moving back to previous levels of employment as an economy is likely to take much longer. But we were, many of our plans up until this point had to consider whether FY 13 would be worse than 12, and you would manage this process differently if you expected that. At this point in time, we do not expect 13 to be worse than 12. The state's economy seems to be picking up a certain level of energy and steam. And so I would expect that this requirement for mission critical approval and the soft freeze or any freeze at the governor level will probably go away in fiscal year 12. And I am hopeful that it would not recur at some time during fiscal year 12.
Go ahead, Michael.
Many tenure-track faculty have this notion of consistent performance over the pre-tenure years. They have to plan now for travel and conferences in the fall. What should they be thinking about?
So, Provost, what should they be thinking about? Cheap tickets.
Yeah, cheap tickets. I think, I mean, some of what's been funded, or some of what we have been able to do this year because we've had one-time money has been to fund things like the faculty research grants that include things like travel for many faculty. So there are some funds that have already been committed that will ease that. Most of the travel money is distributed within the colleges and departments. And so there's, I think that the question is going to really come down to decisions that get made at a college and departmental level.
Go ahead. Thank you. Bob?
Bob Crafter, Political Science and Public Administration. I want to thank you for a very informative and useful and frank discussion. I want to ask a question about the academic report. Seeing as how it's under great stress and has been for several years, it may take several years for it to recover yet. I'm wondering if it isn't possible to consider in the next couple of years doing something to economize on our resources, particularly on faculty resources.
Dr. Kravchuk, Chair of Political Science, complimented the administration on the fantastic job that we've done. And then he raised two questions, really. Are we to the point, isn't the stress on the academic core so significant that we have to alter the way in which we do general education and the courses that students are required to take? And then also, should we consider going back to a regular academic schedule on Friday and possibly also using Saturday classes? I think the provost is perfectly capable of answering both of those questions. But I would say that it's interesting when I put out a question to the campus about what were some recommended efficiency initiatives. An awful lot of people came back with the importance of a 4-day work week. And the thinking there was that we could save on energy and the like. Of course, what that does is it puts stress on your parking and transportation system, though, because you're packing the same number of people into 4 days instead of 5 days. So and also I think politically it's just a non-starter to move in the direction of an official 4-day week in a time of stress. So I think that's not likely to happen. Certainly as we look at the course loads, I think we could talk about Saturday classes. I just haven't given that a lot of thought myself, Bob.
Well, I think, 2 points I'd make, Bob. One is that changing the curriculum is not an easy task. It requires a tremendous amount of review by the faculty. That's not to say that it can't be done. And in fact, we're coming up pretty soon on a 10-year anniversary for the general education program, and so it would be reasonable to take a look at the general education program and ask whether or not it's meeting our needs and whether or not it needs some adjustment. On the point of Friday classes, there is no prohibition against having Friday classes or Saturday classes. We actually use our classrooms more efficiently than any of the other institutions in the state. I think one of the things that, one of the points I tried to make this morning is that we are trying to hold the size of the university's student body at a pretty steady level because we don't have more people to put in classrooms. So while we could have additional sections that we offered on Fridays or Saturdays, we'd still need the people to do that. And so I don't know what the what we would get out of a major change in scheduling at this point.
Thank you very much for your question and for your comment, because I think it does open up something that is really where we are institutionally, and that is that our comments about the budget for fiscal year 12 are not just about fiscal year 12, but they're about the fact that they provide us an opportunity, if not a requirement, to reinvent what we're doing here at UNC Charlotte and on other campuses across the U.S., actually. And so I think that over the course of the coming months and probably more than a year, we will be looking at a lot of things. I certainly will not comment on general education requirements. The provost and the chancellor are much better able to make those specific comments. But I will throw into the mix the fact that we don't expect to get a capital allocation for a new building for years to come. And so we will have to rethink how we use our space. As the provost has indicated, we are the most efficient space users in the UNC system. But we will have to, what now passes for efficiency will have to be significantly rethought in order to meet the need for more and more North Carolinians to go to university. So we will have to rethink a lot of things that we do. Space is certainly one of them. And we will take our position as being the best now to levels that are much higher than exist now. So it really is an opportunity for us to rethink a lot of things, and I look forward to that.
Go ahead.
Just in regards to planning,
Oh, go ahead.
Well, the years I was referring to were fiscal years 9, 10, and 11, and we're in 11 now. So that's the period during which we've had a 3-year plan, typically for the subsequent fiscal year. There is no question that as costs increase, and for those of us, most of us in this room probably were here for the essential reduction in pay that was labeled a furlough. But there's no question that as costs increase, I mean, I had to get gas this morning on the way to work. It was about $60 to fill up my tank. So it's not just what we're paying for our benefits, but it's what we're paying in the community as well for things that we need to live our lives. So you're correct, as our salary has remained flat, these additional costs have eaten into our quality of life. There is some hope at the legislative level that they can structure the budget so that they could look at a salary increase for fiscal year 13, which begins on July 1st of 2012. So that is the hope at the governmental level to do that. We certainly can't know that with any certainty until probably 9 months or so from now, 9 to 12, as we have better information about next year. But the hope is that there would be some salary increase next year.
Yeah, just to be clear about that, those decisions aren't local. Those are all made by the General Assembly. And interestingly enough, sometimes the General Assembly imposes upon us constraints that we wouldn't wish for ourselves. For example, not being able to give increases to people, even in critical retention situations, unless you could document significant expansion of their responsibilities, not being able to respond to faculty offers unless we drew on the Faculty Retention Fund in the Office of the General Administration, or used non-restricted private money, of which we don't have very much. So it's sometimes out of their desire to ensure equity, they ensure universal poverty, and that's been difficult. So we would like to get those things off our backs if we could. But I agree with Beth. There'll be no salary increases in fiscal 12. The best we could look for is fiscal 13. And I think people are pretty keenly aware of what's happened with employees on the, you've had 2 or 3 benefits increases along the way. It's been bad, for sure. Go ahead. Yeah. The current furlough authority expires June 30th this year, 2011. And unless something really odd happened between now and, let's say, the beginning of May, it wouldn't matter. We couldn't furlough fast enough to get dollars together. And the kinds of things that can happen is if the state decides, well, we need to save more money in our current fiscal year, fiscal 11, and the campuses look around and say, well, we haven't saved that money and we don't have it, and the only way we could save it would be to furlough some employees. I think we're the only campus in the system that has an approved furlough plan. So in theory, we could, but I don't expect it. We are advocating for an extension of furlough authority into fiscal 12, however, because like anything else, it's an important tool in the toolbox if you have to assemble dollars. And the kinds of dollars that we've used to buffer these cuts aren't going to be there in the future. For example, enrollment increase monies. We don't expect to see those. So we may have to look at a furlough if and when we got hit with current year reductions next year. But I think the April numbers coming from the Department of Revenue will tell us a lot about the future. And for right now, I think people should just know that furloughs are authorized in the current year, probably going to be extended into the next year, and the extent to which we have to use that is completely unknown at this point.
I'll just add a little to that. Furloughs are used when there's typically a precipitous drop in anticipated income. So the furlough that was used in fiscal year 9 was used because after the economic collapse that occurred beginning in the fall, the economists would say it began in December 2007, But in this state, it was notable beginning in August and September of 2008. And so because the state had so much less incoming cash, they had to assemble dollars, if you will, or hold back dollars. I won't go into the gory details about how they do that, but furlough was necessary. We're not in those same times. I don't expect to, in the next month, as the Chancellor indicated, we should not have to deploy furlough. And I'm actually hopeful that we will not need that furlough in 12 or in 13. But it is important to have tools in the toolkit. It is a way of preserving general employment rather than reductions in force to meet short-term goals. So it is an important tool.
I think we've got about 20 minutes for this room. We can certainly take up there. Anybody? Anybody in the room? Going once? Going twice? I think we're done. Thank you very much.